This is Marshawn Wally, columnist of I'm Just Saying with the Indianapolis Recorder, and we are helping Indy families adapt to educational changes amid the COVID-19 crisis. We have Earl Phalen here with Phalen Leadership Academies. Hi, Earl.
Hi, Marshawn. How are you today?
Not bad. It's not bad. So let's start. Let's go ahead and get to this. Where are Phalen Leadership Academies, and what is a network?
Sure. So Phalen Leadership Academies, it's George and Veronica Phalen, named after my mom and dad. It's a nonprofit grouping of schools. So network is just a group of schools that work with a common playbook and common pillars that we try to bring to our scholars and to our families. We're right now blessed to have 22 schools in our network, and we're in Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Texas, and Florida.
You're a major national player in this space.
We're blessed to serve about 10,000 scholars today.
So what made you get interested in education, and kind of tell us about your path to getting to this position?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in education, I think in part because of my personal journey, being kind of born of a teen mom, being placed into foster care, and at a time at which 70% of Black boys in Massachusetts foster care, which is home for me, ended up in the prison system by the time they were 21. And my mom and dad, George and Veronica Phalen, adopted me, youngest of 8 children. They had 7 naturally born, my brothers and sisters, and still said that, hey, they could bring one more child into their home, and to have my life be completely transformed from the likely probability of jail to then going to Yale University and Harvard Law School was completely changed because of my parents' love. And so that led me to say, I really want to, with my life, I thought I wanted to be a politician as a way of affecting social change. So went to law school thinking, hey, I'm gonna get into politics to affect social change. And then just had a transformative experience one summer tutoring children, and just seeing one young girl's eyes light up when she learned how to count, add 1 + 1, and then realizing that she was smart. And at that point I said, education is my pathway. That's why I was put here on earth. And let me put all my energies to try to help more children have the transformative experience that I had.
That's powerful. That's a powerful story. So education has been your path. It's been what you've been doing for some years here now. What's been the most significant change in education from your perspective as a network operator?
I think one of the biggest changes has been, in some cities, there's beginning to be an appreciation that the debate over charter versus innovation versus traditional public is sort of a false argument. And really what we all should be driving for is high quality schools for all children. And again, I'm not seeing that everywhere, but the vitriol that existed 20 years ago is, at least in some communities, lightening, and people are starting to say, shouldn't we all be just energized and focused exclusively on how do we bring excellence to every student?
So Indiana has an interesting policy kind of environment. It seems like from a choice perspective, it seemed to be pretty attractive. What policies or initiatives do other places have that you wish Indiana had? And then are there any other things that you wish other communities had that Indiana has?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I mean, I think Indiana is a pretty progressive of the 5 states we're in. It's certainly one of the most progressive in terms of the policies. The ability, when we started our first school on 23rd in Illinois, we had to raise $2.5 million. We had to take an old car dealership and get it converted. We had to go out and convince families to come to us. And I think that, now that the innovation law exists, we're not building more. I never felt Indianapolis needed more school buildings. I felt it needed better schools. And so I think Indianapolis and Indiana have been pretty progressive, and probably the most progressive of any of our states as it relates to, wait a second, we have some schools, they're not doing well, and they haven't been doing well for a few years. Let's find operators that can give them a jump start and really get them give the children there and the families there the high quality education they deserve. I mean, at PLA at 93 and PLA at 103 on the east side and the far east side, we've seen enrollment at both campuses increase by over 100 families. And it's not that families moved into those communities, it's that families before had said, I've got to get my child out of this school, even if I have to maybe forge a zip code or falsify that they're living with somebody in one of the townships. And so it's nice to see now that the families are coming back to schools, and not every innovation school is delivered on its promise. It's a hard road to turn a school from unsuccessful to successful. It's not just this linear, smooth and easy path, but there's been a lot of progress. So I think the ability to A, partner with the district, B, for the district to actually share its facilities, C, for the district to be willing to say, these schools aren't living up to our promise and we'll find partners. Those are unique. The only community that has a policy that I would love if it existed in Indianapolis or in Indiana is in Texas. We get about an extra $1,500 per child to develop these partnerships. And obviously that doesn't exist in Indianapolis, but everything else in Indiana is more favorable than in any other community in which we serve.
So, so that's interesting. So the policy environment, but that one issue with the funding seems to be a situation where it would be helpful for the charter schools here.
Yeah, and it's a great piece, and it's really for the turnaround piece. So it's not just for charters. If you're just a charter, you wouldn't get that. But if you partner with the district and you're getting the facilities as part of the partnership, you're getting transportation as part of the partnership, you're getting some services as food services, for instance, as part of the partnership. Texas adds an extra $1,500 because they're saying this is a failing school. The students have been underserved, and clearly there are going to have to be more resources, extra interventionists, updated curriculum, better technology. They're going to need to be more resources to help give scholars in those schools kind of the jump they need. So that's the only kind of additional favorable piece that I've seen in all the states that we serve.
Earl, that actually makes a lot of sense, particularly when you're dealing with under-resourced environments, that they get more resources. I noticed some time ago that you had to step out more in an advocacy kind of role. There was violence that touched some of the families in one of your schools. And can you just talk about your decision to release a kind of a public letter and engage in the way that you did? And also, it sounded like you had put work in on the front end. So it wasn't like you were just complaining. It was, we had a plan and you ignored our plan.
Yeah, I love our scholars, and when I see injustice, and there's injustice in the world, I get it, but when I see such a gross injustice, i.e. the number of shootings where my scholars are saying, oh, I sleep with my feet towards the window, so at least if a bullet comes through, I just get hit in the leg and not in the head. Or, oh, I ran to school today, I didn't want to stay at the bus stop because I figure a moving target is harder to hit than a standing target. That sickens me. And we had started to see an increase in violence on the Far East Side and throughout Indianapolis. And so we had reached out to the mayor's office and met with the deputy mayor and sat and tried to, and the chief of staff of IPS, Ahmed, and tried to have a conversation about what strategies can we employ that will help reduce violence. And some of them were just the traditional strategies of more community policing, more police presence within our schools so that there is a relationship before there's not a relationship and there's interaction during a tense time. We had talked about making sure that there were straight street lights. So when our girls and boys walk home after basketball or after football practice or track or dance, that they're actually on lighted streets. We asked for sidewalks. Children shouldn't be walking down 42nd Street on the edge of a road at night. That's a liability. It's not fair. So we just asked for some things that were just community improvement conditions, and then others that were more on the kind of policing, and then the others on resources. How do we keep our children more engaged in out of school time activities? How do we make an investment and make sure the children stay off the streets and are engaged in the positive stuff that they love to be participating in? And we had done that and kind of left the meeting, and that was in the summertime, and there was no action. or at least as far as I could see, there was no visible action to any of the commitments that we had made in that meeting. And so tried to reach out again, directly to get a sit down with the mayor, and that was fruitless and didn't receive a response. And so ultimately then, when one of my other scholars got shot 6 times, I woke up feeling enough is enough. We're not going to not be heard. We are citizens of Indianapolis. We are taxpayers in Indianapolis, and the government's role is one of 2 things, is really fire safety and police safety, protection of its citizens. And we felt that the mayor was not living up to his promise, and not even that gun violence will be eradicated, but that at least we see effort and commitment to take simple steps that would make our community safer. And we didn't see that. And so I ended up writing that letter, and that letter expressed my feelings.
Yeah. So as getting into education, did you anticipate that you would have to be an advocate in this way? I mean, I know, you advocate for, getting textbooks and technology and resources and making sure kids are in a good and healthy learning environment. Did you come into this thinking that maybe you might have to advocate outside of the classroom for issues?
Well, my dad's always told me that I'm pretty naive. And so my naive answer is no. I felt like, gosh, we have a pretty heavy lift. We have scholars who are 2 years, 3 years, 5 years behind. And we have scholars that come from some good, really strong homes. We have some scholars who come from some really, really tough situations. And so we felt like, holy cow, it's a big lift to have to take care of the educational and support the educational needs of our scholars, to meet the hunger and nutrition needs of our scholars, to meet the social emotional growth needs of our scholars. We felt like, wow, that's a pretty heavy lift, and never thought that we'd have to be advocates on some basic human needs that our children and families deserve. So that's been a new thing to me. But again, somebody's got to be a voice, and when there are a lot of great voices speaking on behalf of children, we've all got to be a unified and collective voice that we're all citizens of Indianapolis and deserve to be treated humanely and like humans.
So appreciated your advocacy in that space. COVID-19, it hit fast, it hit hard. I think it's fair to say that when we're looking at, the populations of the students and the families that you're serving, a lot of Black folks, a lot of underserved communities. How has this impacted your scholars' year, and what are you most concerned about?
It's had a devastating impact on our scholars' years. You look at the food piece and you see how many scholars benefit from the breakfast, the lunch, and either the snack or dinner at their schools. And so you have that piece. And I've been very pleased with how the state, the federal government, IPS, and my team has responded to that. I think we've been able to keep that piece moving with a grab and go and trying to keep the right social distance. And so that piece, was the first hit that we were worried about. And I'm really pleased how we did that. The second concern of ours was academics. How do you keep learning going? And sending home paper packets is a step, but that's not instruction. So if you're doing double digit with a carryover wrong on the first day of your packet, you're probably going to do it wrong. You may do the work, but you're probably going to do it wrong all week. And that doesn't even talk about scholars who sometimes need a little extra push to actually do the work. So we were very worried about the instruction piece, and we all know the impacts of summer learning loss, i.e. 2 months out of school. Well, this is the same effect in the sense, but it's just a different time of the year where instruction has slowed. But we've come up with some pretty good solutions for that, which I'm willing to talk about how we're going to keep instruction going for our scholars. The thing that my leaders, Nicole Fama and many others, said to me, hey, Earl, I know you're worried about food and academics, but the biggest impact is going to be on the social emotional piece. The school is such a place for love, high fives. You had a bad night, but we're going to help get you back on track and make today a positive day. It's structured. That we had students who, candidly, we have some tough scholars who would make the right choice because they didn't want to upset their coach. right? And wouldn't do the bad thing because they wanted to make sure their teacher or their favorite teacher felt good about them the next day. And so it kind of, that structure of school helped them stay out of stuff. And then you take that and you just kind of completely wipe that away. But not only do you wipe it away, you wipe away all the positive things that children get from school as they're trying to figure out their identity, as they're trying to build friendships, as they're trying to fit in and feel loved and find, what their future is going to be and craft that. That got sucked the hardest, and that's been the hardest part of this transition. And my teachers are trying to respond, right? They're doing, I think Pizza Hut delivered pizza to one classroom, and they did a virtual Pizza Hut. Another group had a dance off. I'm getting and overloaded with Baby Shark videos made by our scholars and stuff like that. So we're trying to recover and be resilient and be, there's still something about having that structure and how that's hurt our scholars. We had 5 scholars arrested in the first 7 days when this crisis hit. And those are scholars who are tough kids, but they had committed to kind of leaning into the Phalen system and leaning into the love that they were getting from their school leaders and from their teachers. And that was keeping them off the wrong track. And then the rug got pulled out, and now, they made different choices. So that social emotional piece is still the one that worries me the most.
It's that community. There's a community in that social emotional piece.
That's
where
right.
You got folks that kind of keep folks from making the wrong choices and decisions, and they also just peers. I mean,
That's
just
right.
having peers and being around folks that are like-minded and have bought into the program that you're offering. One of the concerns that's obviously come up, and my sense has been a strength of your school and your school model, is the leveraging of technology to advance student growth. So can you talk about the digital divide and how your school kind of manages that and how you all approach that issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a challenging one. So, as I said, that when this first hit, we went with paper-based packets, and you had work that could carry you for about 2 weeks. And we had Monday pickups every Monday for food, grab-and-go meals. And so you could turn in your assignments for the week, would correct them and get them back to you. But our more affluent peers had a very different experience. They went right to their e-learning playbook. They had one-to-one devices. They had internet connectivity. They had a private and quiet space in the home that they could get online without distraction. And all of a sudden, didn't miss a beat. Instruction continued. In fact, it was challenging, I know, for many families of wealthier, middle and wealthier students, because now they had to help be a peer to the online learning piece, and while they were trying to do work from home. So I'm not saying that other communities weren't without struggle. This has been a crisis for everybody. For our scholars, we didn't have the one-to-one devices in most of our homes. In 90% of our homes, we didn't have the internet connectivity. And so we've been blessed to have launched a campaign. And again, we're responsible for 10,000 scholars nationwide, but we launched a campaign a week and a half ago. We've already secured 3,400 devices, so about 34% of the way towards goal. We saw that the Fairbanks Foundation and Mind Trust and several others launched and the mayor's office launched the e-learning fund that will provide more resources. So right now we're kind of saying, all right, phase 1 was paper. Phase 2, which I didn't mention yet, we created a website that's available on any device that has 400 teacher videos of about 12 minutes each that are instruction. That's teachers delivering, hey, prediction, right? And so what is prediction? And goes through the video, and then the scholars we've sent home ELA and math, just traditional notebooks, so that the scholars can work on their assignments based on the instruction they get. And so that piece is now going to be available next Monday, actually, for all of our scholars and families. So now you can get it on any device. And our hope is that by May 1st, we're actually at a place that every home has a device, every home is connected in Indianapolis, and we're actually able to deliver our e-learning program virtually. So that would be teacher-based. We're looking for actually celebrities to kind of kick off the morning homeroom. So that scholars are encouraged to get online on time, right? At 8:45, you have homeroom. And Marlon Jackson is one of our board members, and obviously a former Colt. He's agreed to do it. Ricky Williams, who's Heisman Trophy winner from University of Texas. They're all going out and getting some of their friends, and we're just really starting to build up. And again, we'll ultimately have to be celebrities and leaders, so our scholars can see Black judges, and they can see doctors, Black doctors, and others, and other races as well. But what we're trying to do at first is, hey, let's get some celebrities so there's some power to make sure you are saying, hey, I got to get logged on because I want to be able to ask Marlon Jackson a question. I want to be able to ask Ricky Williams a question and stuff like that. So we're excited about May, and we're starting to look at the year differently, which is, yeah, we were supposed to end at Memorial Day, but our scholars have been disrupted so much. And so how do you keep that one-to-one learning happening during the summer months for scholars? Because you wouldn't, well, we're not going to just shut down because it says summertime. We're going to say, well, no, this has been a massive disruption. Let's use technology in a thoughtful way and continue to deliver instruction. And it's going to be academics in the morning, but it's also going to be fun clubs in the afternoon. The scholars wanted a Fortnite club. They want to have a John Madden football tournament, a bracket tournament. They're doing already dance, like Peloton-like delivered dance classes and yoga classes. So it's going to be morning academics and afternoon, trying to make it really fun for the scholars.
Okay. So it sounds like you all have a pretty aggressive plan that you're phasing in over time. One of the challenges, and you kind of referenced this, is parents aren't licensed teachers.
Yes.
And so what advice do you have for parents working with their kids at home? And have you modified your expectations for just your students right now, just because of all the change with COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word that has to be the driver is grace. And I think the other word is best, or words are best effort, which is we've got to have grace during this time. As I said, many of our scholars are 8 scholars living in a very small space. To say, hey, focus on your e-learning, don't be distracted, and yeah, you want to keep high expectations, but you have to be realistic to the fact that this is new for all of us. Our scholars and our families are very scared. As we see in the news, now this is hitting African American communities at a disproportionate rate in terms of the number of deaths versus the percent of population. So there's got to be a lot of grace and patience. And that's why we kind of say, let's just do our best in May. And if only 10% of our scholars are doing this well, and some might say, oh, Earl, you have low expectations. Well, okay. If 10% of them are doing it well at the beginning of May, maybe we get it to 40% are doing it well at the end of May, and 70% are doing it well during the summer months, and as long as this piece goes. And so we're kind of seeing this as a long play and as a way to rethink how we provide education, so that when we do ultimately come back, we want the one-to-one devices to continue to be a support to our scholars, so we can leverage time to get our scholars, up to grade level, and then accelerating way ahead.
So one of the things that's kind of implicated here is the racial achievement gap.
Yes.
Which is a national problem. It's a problem all over the country. In Indianapolis, I talk about it quite a bit. It's not, just a IPS problem or a charter school problem. It's countywide. So you've lost a significant portion of your school year. You're going to have to change kind of like the expectations, and that's just being realistic. Mm-hmm. What do you think the Black community can do to support our children during this time, in this particular environment? What's the Black community's role in this?
I mean, I think in as much as a community, we can support every one of our children. I'm not talking about Phalen scholars, but every one of our children, and making sure that they have the devices that they need, the iPads for the younger scholars, the Chromebooks for the older scholars, and connectivity. If we can help with that, I think that's one piece. I think the second piece, which I think we're doing a pretty good job as a community, is making sure, the food insecurity piece. If this thing continues on and on, our neighborhoods don't have the grocery store that you can go to that's right around the block. And so this just exacerbates the issues of kind of food deserts and access to nutritional stuff that will help us stay healthy during this time. So I think the more we can continue to be strategic and be long-minded in this view that I know folks say, oh, we're going to be back in school next fall. Maybe.
I promise. Yeah.
Probably not. But
Yeah.
so if this thing goes until December, how do we make sure we continue to be vigilant about getting healthy food, access to healthy foods for our scholars and families? I think the third thing is to continue to advocate, as you shared, and the racial achievement divide, to me, when this hit, got bigger, right? And the longer this goes, there's a risk that it gets even wider and wider. I mean, IPS is doing its best effort, but they're only able to have enough devices right now for their older students, right? And so the younger students are still doing stuff that's a little bit more makeshift, and that's going to create an incredible divide. That's not what Carmel's doing. Carmel's doing something very different. Every child of every age. So I think the more that we as a community can be advocates in our corporations, to the philanthropic community, and to state legislatures, to make sure that this is a chance to kind of level the playing field a little bit. It's not leveling the playing field totally, but level it a little bit. I think that I've seen great leadership with some of the housing developments in the communities in which we serve, where they're saying, hey, don't you worry about rent for the next 3 months. Don't worry at all about it. We just want you to be safe and sound, stay in, don't put yourself at risk. And I think that the more of our housing developments that can do things like that ease the burden on our families of housing. We already have the job insecurity burden, but ease the burden. The other thing that I saw yesterday is that 10 million Americans, and I presume many of them are Black Americans, may not get their stimulus funds because we haven't submitted for taxes for several years. Yep. And so please help if you can, and this is directly to the families, fill out a tax, put your income at zero, and just get it submitted so you're at least in the Rolodex to get that check, whether it's $1,000 or $2,000 or what have you, so you don't miss out on it. But if you haven't submitted for taxes, you may not be getting a stimulus check, and you're owed that stimulus check. That's what all the nation is supposed to get, and it's one of the ways the federal government is trying to support us and to support you. So those are some of the things. I'm trying to raise a fund, Marshawn, that will, to your point of parents, I'm trying to say, listen, for a kindergartner or first grader to log on to his or her iPad at 8:45 to stay focused for 2.5 hours. Come on, like,
yeah, that's heavy lift.
That's right. And so I'm trying to raise a fund that would allow for parents to serve as teachers' assistants. So they can serve as one-to-one, and not every parent's going to want to do it. And many of our parents are still working their traditional piece, but there'll be some parents who say, hey, I want to work with a small group of students, such as my child in my home, and maybe 2 or 3 other children, and support them during this e-learning journey, because you do need a virtual learning. You need a parent, especially with the younger scholars, to sit beside you just to help you, encourage you, stay focused if you run into a technology issue. And so I think those are some of the things that can be done to support, that the Black community can do right now to support, sponsor a TA and pay the stipend for a parent to be a TA for the next 3 months to their child, brings economic stability to the home, and allows for the e-learning to actually be something that might be realistically delivered and accepted.
What I appreciate about the things that you said is these are things that we can do, and these are things that we maybe can do at home. I can do some of these things, like just reaching out to my teacher and saying, hey, I'd be willing to kind of sit with other kids. Right. That's a very helpful suggestion. So one of the realities of COVID-19 and its impact on schools, we talked about it hitting fast and hard. There's a lot of things that maybe you still just don't know.
Yeah.
What are some things that you wish that you knew that you don't know right now? How you mentioned the fall earlier. How are you thinking about the fall next year, especially with the exacerbation of the achievement gap, and what role do they play in this? How are you thinking about that right now?
So we're trying to run several models, and obviously our prayer is we find a cure, and that we're able to be back to some level of normal school attendance and other social interaction, by the fall, which is, beginning of April beginning of August is when school starts. But the model that we're leaning much more into is that the runway is going to be a lot longer. And that even if we do find a cure, you're not going to then say, okay, everybody, go back to the grocery stores, go back to the churches, go back to the schools, go back to work and be around folks. I mean, there's not going to be enough volume at first. There's not going to be enough centers to go to. So there's going to have to be some, I would think, ease back in period. So the thing we don't know is the time, but we're sort of leaning into, this may take us through January of next year. And if it does, what does our plan need to look like for that piece? The other piece that I don't know is how many parents would take us up if we said, hey, you can get a small stipend. It's not big, but you can get a small stipend to be your child's TA. How many parents would be interested in taking us up on that? Because if this is 6 months or 9 months or what have you, we've got to find a way to keep our younger scholars. Everybody knows about the importance of reading proficiently by 3rd grade. Well, no instruction or limited instruction is not the way to achieve that benchmark, and that creates such a further gap for our children if they don't have that piece. I think the third thing is, that I don't know, but I want to encourage is for parents to really get a routine and try to have that routine include a bedtime story. It could be a rap, it can be a story. I know not everybody can read well. I know not everybody has books in the home. So tell stories with your children, but keep that language development piece and the stimulation piece going for our children, because if this does go as long as it may go, we're going to need everybody to be side by side and trying to keep our scholars growing and developing and learning.
So, yeah, in this time of uncertainty, you've been doing everything we can. Just sounds like just talking to our kids and having these conversations is going to be one thing that can help us as we move through this intense period of uncertainty. Policymakers are going to play a critical role as we move forward. What do you want policymakers to know about, networks? You're operating in multiple jurisdictions. You're having to deal with different policy environments. What do you want policymakers to know about being a network operator?
I think it goes back to, what we discussed before. This is exposing existing gaps. And so I want policymakers to know, as they say, hey, we have these expectations for instruction. Well, the schools are on very different playing grounds. And so have those expectations, that's fine, we'll lean into them, but then couple that with resources. So if you don't have technology and one-to-one devices and internet connectivity, we're going to make sure you have those devices within the next 30 days, within the next 45 days. So that now the expectation becomes, well, you got to be committed to executing. PLA as a network has to be committed to executing, but my scholars have the resources that they need. I think that's one piece. I think the second piece, I think the state has done a good job in sort of kind of saying, hey, we're not going to have any accountability as it relates to, we're going to pause that for a little bit. So I think continuing for the policymakers to demonstrate grace and understanding that there's vast inequities throughout Indiana, and to have expectations of great height during this time is not that realistic unless the resources are coupled with them. So keep providing us with the resources, and we as a network will find a way to live up to the expectations.
So one of the things I appreciated about Phalen Leadership Academies, and I've had an opportunity to visit a couple of them, is you do a great job of both leveraging technology, having culturally competent kind of environments, and then also going out raising money and bringing resources to bear to support scholars, particularly in underserved environments.
Yes.
Now I just gave you a commercial, but why do you think families choose Phalen Leadership Academies?
I think, and thanks for the commercial. I think that they choose us because of all those things, and I think they know how much we love their children. And so, love as an expression of action is doing what you said, finding resources where there may not have been enough with just the state funds and federal funds to do it. I think, the number of calls that my teachers get in group FaceTimes as late as 10 and 11 o'clock is an expression of how much our children are thirsting for the love that we have for them. I think our families appreciate that, you know, PLA focuses on the academics, but also has the arts. We have a partnership with Young Actors Theater, so we have children who use it learning theater. We're opening a cultural center on our campus on the Far East Side at 42nd and Midhofer, James and Rosemary Phalen Leadership Academy. That cultural center is going to be open to the community. It's going to be a resource. We're going to have movies. We're going to have spoken word on Saturdays. We're going to have, so I think they appreciate that we're looking out for the community. It's been beautiful to see our sports program evolve. When we first started, and I played basketball in college, when we first started, I said, no, we're going to be scholars. We're not going to worry at all about the sports. And then my families quickly told me, yeah, you could do that. You're just none of us going to go to your high school or your middle school because we're going to go somewhere that has sports. So I said, all right, let's reconsider that position. But what I found is actually what I knew, so I'm not sure where the disconnect was, but what I found was the beauty of sports, right? I think people appreciate, we were allowed by IPS to use John Marshall's football field, and we'd have kids from the surrounding housing developments come to the fences and try to watch the game, and we'd say, no, come around. Come on in and be part of this. And we'd have 300, 400 fans, probably half of them weren't connected to either team, but now all of a sudden there's joy as somebody catches a long pass or you know, makes a big tackle. And so I think that folks appreciate that A, we love our scholars, and then B, there's a real drive towards excellence. I mean, all of our scholars at JRP, our middle high school, are signed up for 21st Century Scholars Fund. And does that mean everybody's going to choose to go to college? No. Some of our scholars have told me, no, they want to go and work in construction. They want to go and do X, Y, Z. And so for the scholars, we say, hey, but you have to have the ability, not the ability, you have to have the opportunity to go to college if you choose to go. And so the 21st Century obviously covers all of your tuition, and we're working to raise funds to cover room and board, transportation fees, and the other things that sometimes get children caught up. And I think families appreciate that we listen, because when our scholars said, hey, we want to go directly into work, we said, all right, well, you've got to be thoughtful, and you got to line your career aspirations up with an experience that will allow you to, you know, get a job that you start at $30,000, $35,000, $50,000 or more. And there are careers that are in high demand for talent. And so we kind of put together a career technical education program that starts sophomore year with an experience through Marion Glick's Teamwork. So you get a work experience. Then you kind of choose one of 4 tracks that you think want to be your career. You take as part of your integrated curriculum and your coursework, you take those classes, and then when you're graduating with a diploma, but you also have a credential on the other hand that can get you into a high-paying job with health insurance, or a good-paying job with health insurance that has the ability to rise. So I think people appreciate that we listen, that we're collaborative, that we're thinking about our children's future, and that we bring all of ourselves to it. We're very imperfect, or I'm very imperfect, but you will never question whether I'm bringing all of my heart and spirit towards supporting your child's and your goals for your child.
This has been a conversation with Earl Phalen of Phalen Leadership Academies. We've been discussing helping Indy families adapt to educational change amid the COVID crisis. They bring all of themselves. Thank you, Earl. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rashawn.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.